What's up, brother? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the conversation of the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with my next guest. I just feel like I've been talking about language and literature and Shakespeare and hip hop over the last week and a half. And so the timing of this guest was perfect. Jason Reynolds is the second time being here on the Mike Muse Show, so he is no stranger to us. I got introduced to Jason Reynolds by one of his biggest fans on Martha's Vineyard. We were rocking on the porch, and she kept talking about one of her favorite young adult authors named Jason Reynolds. And so we got into a whole big conversation about Jason. And then literally, as fate would have it, I got approached for him and I to be in conversation with one of his previous books. And now Jason is back. Jason is the New York Times #1 bestseller when it comes to young adult novels. And I couldn't think of a better person to talk to right now in this time period. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jason Reynolds. What is happening, my friend?
My guy, what's happening, Mike? Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you, man. Like, what is it like to be known as a New York Times bestseller? Like, I just think that's such a huge feat. The idea of writing a one-page paper for me just gives me like the chills and the shivers.
It's great. I mean, it's one of those things that you only got to do it one time for it to stick with you for the rest of your career. That's the upside. But I feel really blessed, man. I've been fortunate enough to do it quite a few times in my career, and it's a humbling experience always, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So for this current book, it's Stunt Boy in the Meantime, and it's a children's first time you've done a novel for middle school kids, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the right language?
No, it's the first time I've done a novel for younger. It's like what do they call it? It's like a younger middle grade. It's sort of like that.
Middle grade.
Yeah. And I've done middle grade, but it's like a younger middle grade.
Got it. So me being illiterate, I took middle grade as being middle school. See what happens? You just make up your own ideologies.
It's a fair mistake, man. It happens.
I'm like, middle grade, totally middle school. Totally makes sense. Absolutely. I absolutely get it. So for this book, I'm always curious, like, where do authors set, right? Like, where do they sit? Where do you go? So where were you when you wrote this book? Here's what it is, Jason, audience. So growing up, I had no creativity. I had no imagination. Like, I could write technical. I can do technical writing, right? If you told me to write on a subject, write an essay about coffee and coffee beans and Colombia, like, I could do that. But if you gave me a blank piece of paper and you told me to write, I would freeze and to say, write anything you want. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I needed direction and I would freeze. And so, over time I can write, but it was just a pain. It still is for a very painful experience for me. So I'm always curious about the writing process for individuals like you who are so accomplished and are incredible writers. Like, what does your process begin with? Are you in your bedroom? Are you on the beach? Are you in the woods? Are you in a coffee shop?
Man, you know what, man? For me, I think writing always begins with a character. It's like one of these things where I feel like we're all obsessed with each other. We don't like to think about it that way, but the truth of the matter is that the greatest gift that human beings have ever given each other is each other. Right? And so I always begin with people. I'm a people kind of guy. And if I can figure out how to create a person that feels real enough for another person to spend a week with them, right? A couple of days, a couple of hours. That's what you're doing when you're reading a book. You're spending time with these people. If I could get that part right, the rest of it don't matter. It doesn't even really matter what the plot is if the person is interesting enough. Right? It's like, and I liken this to our everyday lives, Mike. I mean, think about your friends, your friendship circle, your closest, your day ones, right? Your best people in your life, y'all ain't gotta do nothing to enjoy each other's company. You just gotta be in each other's company.
Oh, that's good.
Right? And so that's the way I think about it. So I always start with the person, and then from there I kind of build out.
That is beautiful, man. I mean, I never thought about it from that context, right? I think even how actors get into the mindset of their characters and the method acting and how they sit with their characters, whether or not it's imaginary, whether it's a real person drawing on real experience. But the idea that you actually turn into a character and think about the character in such a humanizing way, it's like you humanize a character, which then makes it more conversational. I think what you do is no different than how I look when I look into like a camera. Some people are very intimidated by the camera, but for whatever reason, I actually humanize it to make it more comfortable for me, right? Because this innate object that could be really weird and strange, there's a human behind it. So it's almost like you're more worried about the human through the vehicle of this camera, right? And this idea of judgment that is happening, right? And so I find a way to turn complicated things into humanizing and human characteristics in order to make me more comfortable with things. And so for you to do that process.
That's it. We do the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah. So where did this book come from? I know it's about the story of divorce, and I was interested in the thought process of why did you feel it was important to do this? That's not a topic that is normally tackled through the young adult world.
I know, but that's the reason, right? We always look for the white space. We always look for the negative space. I think when I say negative space, I mean the space where things aren't being talked about, not necessarily negativity, but just where the gaps in our landscape, where the gaps in our patchwork, right? And so for me, it's strange that we don't talk about divorce when it's so normal. It's such a normal part of our lives, right? Divorce rate is what, 50-60%, right? Went up a little higher during COVID. And so at some point we have to accept and address the fact that this is a part of the human experience, at least for Americans. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, isn't really of any consequence. What we know for a fact is that it is real, it is happening, and somebody got to say something. I'm a product of it. I come from it. All of my friends come from it. I grew up with 8 homeboys, and all of us came from divorced households or split households, right? It doesn't have to be ugly, but it does have to be addressed, because young people oftentimes in the midst of it feel like they're being split, feel like they're being pulled in 2 different directions, feel like it's their fault. And so at some point we should we should address it for the kids, but we should also, for me at least, I wanted to also create a tool that parents could use to better have these conversations with their young folks as their family dynamics are shifting.
So you almost use it as a vehicle for parents to be able to talk to their children about it, because I feel like no parents do an awful job when it comes to talking to their children, no matter what the age is, around divorce or about that idea. Ironically enough, Jason, I was talking with a buddy of mine, and we were talking about single family households and the structures of that. And then he was having a conversation about, kind of, I wouldn't say he was wishing his parents were together, but because of the lack of them being a unit, the complication that it cost his life. And it made me think about how the grass is kind of always green on the other side, because one of my, let's call him my mentees, he was talking about he was in grad school. And kind of the example you raised about your 8 friends that you grew up with. He was in grad school, it's 3 of them. And his parents got divorced when he was post-college. The second guy's parents got divorced when he was a young child. And then the third guy, their roommate, his parents were never together. And it was a situation where the grass was always greener for each one. Where my friend parents got divorced post-college, he wished they got divorced sooner when he was younger. The ones who were younger, got divorced younger, wish they got divorced later, right? And then the ones whose parents never were married, wish he saw his parents married. Right. And so it's this interesting psychology of divorce and family structure. And then also, too, the pressure we put on the family structure and the family unit of like this idealistic narrative of a 2-parent household.
It's real, man. Like, it's an interesting thing. Like, I think about my family, my mother and father. My parents were very close as married people, and were very close as divorced people. Right. And so I got to see a healthy marriage and a healthy divorce, and a healthy remarriage for my father, and then 20 years of a healthy marriage for him until his death, right? And all of those things were really healthy for me, despite the complexity of splitting parents, and despite the complexity of changing and growing, right? Of a family that changes and grows, and having to deal with the emotions and the anxiety around those things, because, like you said, my mother didn't really know how to talk about it very well, but she did know how to model it. Right. So even though I had to kind of fight through the wilderness of it all on my own, unfortunately, at least I could look at my parents and see them both, when they were around each other, see them both like being like, hey, man, I love your father. That's my guy. That's my friend. We aren't doing that thing anymore. But you're never going to hear me say a bad word about this, man. And my father, too. Hey, man, I want you to know I'm always going to love your mother. That's my girl. This can't work no more. But like, I didn't see that. Now I got other friends who went through the real knuckle up, right? Who really went through the travesty of divorce and the ugliness of divorce, right? That wasn't my experience, but I saw it with my friends. I saw other friends who visitation. I never had to deal with visitation, But I saw friends who like, yo, I gotta take my kid to the mall, and he gotta meet me at the mall because it's a neutral location, and we can't, right? All of that. So it's all these different ways that we can think about these things, and I think that's the reason why we should start exploring it through story. So much there.
And what I love about this conversation we're having is because there's no divorce is so universal. And divorce doesn't mean failure. And I think sometimes we often put failure in the divorce, right? And that doesn't mean you failed, right? Like the marriage could fail and could end, but that doesn't mean you are a failure, right? Or that energy shouldn't be transferred to the kids, but unfortunately that is. And I'm just thinking about like all my friends have different socioeconomical backgrounds, different levels of education, from just a high school education all the way up to PhD levels. And the numbers are divorced or are still struggling with, you just talking about the parent handoff, or a good friend of mine is going through that right now. And, I'm supporting this individual, doing a drop off, right? Just because for all the reasons why you probably could imagine why she would need to do a drop off, right? And so what that matters, right? And so, damn, Jason, I wasn't even thinking about all the complexities of divorce and the booby traps that can exist, and sometimes what society place on this perfect family, like this Hallmark card, right? I think that's why we're coming up the holidays, which makes the holiday so tough, because it's just like this idealistic version of Christmas, right? This idealistic version, of Thanksgiving, like this wholesome family with extended family with both sets of grandparents sitting around the table eating turkey. Like that's just not everybody's reality.
It's not. And I think it's okay. I think, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago now, I stopped saying that I came from a broken home, because I didn't come from a broken home. Broken home. And the reason why I say that is because broken homes make broken things.
Ooh.
And I ain't a broken thing. It was a different dynamic. It was a different kind of family. That's all. But it wasn't a broken family.
Damn, that's good. It's all about rechanging the narrative and repositioning of that, because so many people and children think they come from broken homes, right? And we've allowed that terminology to fester, when it comes to this brokenness and the brokenness of family. And words matter, right? And words have power, and the intentionality of words have power. You're brilliant for doing this, like literally brilliant for doing this, and to really leaning into it, and leaning in it from the place of not looking at divorce as this negative thing, at least, and for me, and that's how I've always looked at divorce. And I think religion has played such a stronghold on things, right? I'm not here to get too religious when it comes to it, but this idea that divorce is a sin, right? Mm-hmm. And it's taboo, and sometimes I feel like it forces people to live in these marriages that both parties are so unhappy and are miserable, right? But they're doing it through this religious lens and this religious context. I could cite so many examples of this. It's quite funny. I have another homie right now who is miserable in his marriage. Like he talks to me all the time, and I never give advice in terms of what a person should do. But he and his wife have attended counseling, like all the things. But yeah, he's telling me that he wants to stay in it for religious purposes. And I was just like, I don't know if the God we serve will want you to be this unhappy. You know what I mean? Like,
I think about it like this, man. Even religiously, and I'm not a religious person, but I've studied my fair share and done my due diligence. One of the things I think about all the time is the idea of trying to model God's love, right? And the interesting thing about modeling God's love is that I think that what we do religiously, whatever your religious sort of practices are, is that you make a pact that you believe that you will trust and follow, and love God, Jesus, depending upon whatever your religious sort of beliefs are, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you, for some reason, were to break that pact, like many of us have and do, does the Jesus and the God and all of this, whichever deity you choose to serve, do they no longer love you? And the answer is, of course, they still love you, despite you not being able to uphold the pact. And so when I think about marriage and I think about divorce, specifically religiously, I always think about the fact that because we aren't able to uphold this pact does not mean that I don't love you. So the true pact has never actually been broken. The true pact, which is the pact of love, right? Yes, the contractual element is broken now. Yes, under God's eye, we decided we in witnesses, we decided we would do this thing and we would dedicate our lives to one another in love, though, with love at the helm. Because we've broken this particular part of the pact, did we break the most important part of the pact, which is the pact of love? And the answer is no. My parents still loved each other. Truly. They just knew that their love was a love that had to exist in a different circumstance, a different container. So did they actually, you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's nuance that we have to delve into, I think, even religiously.
I love the idea of pact versus contractually. And what you're going to is modeling God's love, which is agape love. And so it's a matter. And so my therapist told me a while ago, she said, I came in and I did whatever a religious person does, is I went in to complain. I was like, man, this is going wrong, this is going wrong, this is going wrong. All the things it's fire all around me. And then I said, but I'm blessed, highly favored. So I went into that cadence, right? And then she stopped me, right? And so she wasn't she's not religious, she's spiritual. And she knew I was coming at this time as very religious perspective. I'm more spiritual than I am religious now. And she says, like, let me ask you a question. And this is how she said it. She could be so satirical. She said, this God of yours, this God you come in and talk about so much to me about, do you really think he's going to take away your blessings because you are having a bad day and you informed me you're having a bad day? And I was like, ooh, you got me. Like, no. But we're so taught, right? Like all these social contracts, this prism of religion that you can't express, right? And the modeling of God's love must mean adhering to the 10 Commandments and to the letter of the law in a literal perspective, right? And so, but you really separating the pack of love, right, versus a contractual agreement, which is whatever that means, right? And it's really for tax purpose, mortgage purposes, unemployment insurance, you know, that all those things contractually, right? That is no longer in existence, but doesn't mean that love could ever really be taken away from that.
That's it, man. I mean, at the end of the day, brother, you know, at the end of the day, the God I serve is a macro God, not a micro God. And what that means for me is that he whatever that God is, does not have time to deal with the minutia of our lives. At the end of the day, there's an overall picture, and I'd like to believe that this is a big picture kind of God. Did I lead a loving life? Was I of service to my fellow man? Did I take care of these children? Right? Like these are the God I serve ain't got time to worry about whether or not I'm cussing and whether or not I drink. And whether like I don't, for me personally, everybody got their own thing, right? But for me, and so I don't think that the guy got time to worry about this paperwork I got to go through to get this divorce.
Yeah, it's not.
But you lead with love,
because it goes to grace, right? And audience, we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole right now. Don't worry, I'm going to reel up, Jason. I'm going to pull out of it. But let me close out here, and then we can transition out of it. Though it goes down to the idea of you can't undo your salvation, right? If you believe in the Trinity, if you believe in the King James version of what religion is, that, you know, my pastor has taught me that you can't undo your salvation, right? And so God would never take away your salvation because you cussed or you drank or you smoked or you did the deeds, right? And then this narrative of grace that is allowed, right, for you to exist, but somehow that's gotten lost in the micro, as you say, approach to religion. Fascinating, Jason. So I see why you write as well as you do. You write very conversationally.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, ultimately all of us, young people, old people, older people, we're all more likely to listen if we're in conversation and not if we're being lectured to. Right? We all just want a little discussion, a little conversation. Pretend you don't know. Right? Like when you approach me as if you don't know whether or not I already know the answer, right? Let's have some discourse. Let's have some conversation. Let's get to know one another over and over and over again. So when I think about the work that I'm making, I wanted to feel like these young people or these older people are having a casual chat with me, and that I'm trying to get to know them, and that they're trying to get to know themselves, and that they get to know themselves through the characters that they're interacting with in these stories, right? Like I always say, this is a container for secrets. These books are where you can put your secrets. Not all of us are able to tell, like your homeboy who's dealing with what he's dealing with, you know, a lot in terms of his partnership. You know, sometimes you read a book and you can put all of that, you can put all those feelings and things that you can't quite say, where you can hide them within the pages of a book, because now, you know, you're not the only person feeling that way, right?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and these are the things that I'm always kind of thinking about.
Let me go look at my bookshelf over here inside. I can put some secrets in these pages back there. I keep looking over my shoulder, audience. That's where my bookshelf is. Let me go put some secrets into that white space. Well, I find that very interesting because Jason, your approach is, you kind of take the approach of thinking about the reader who may not naturally gravitate towards reading, right? And I think when you naturally do that, I wonder then, I think that is actually what makes your work so impactful, right? Is because you're thinking about those who would normally read. So it seems like you grab those who do read, and then you're able to bring in audiences who don't normally gravitate towards literature.
Yeah, you know what I think about it, Laz, man? Because you're right. I think about it like like Black-owned businesses. Here, let me explain what I mean. Black-owned, Black folks, we feel comfortable in the places that we feel like were meant for us. Right now, of course, we know that we are, like, everywhere is for us, right? But we feel comfortable in the places that we feel like are thinking about us. And so the companies that say, this is a company that I'm thinking about the Black constituent, Black folks will show up and be like, this for us. White folk are never uncomfortable anywhere. So they just want to know what's the cool thing, what's the new thing, where's everybody going, right? Because we're gonna go there. Doesn't matter if it's quote unquote for them or not. We're gonna go if it's new. I'm never uncomfortable. So if you know that going into it, there's no reason to cater to them, because they gonna come regardless. Cater, right? You cater to the Black folk, and then when you get the Black folk there, trust me, everybody gonna come. So when I think about writing these books, I'm thinking like, what about not the least among us, but the ones who are struggling with reading, the ones who this may not be their jam. How can I make a comfortable place for them? Because everybody who love reading gonna come regardless, because they're not uncomfortable with reading anything. They're gonna be here. If it's good, they're gonna be here. But how do I get the ones that's like, hey man, I want to make sure that this is a comfortable place for me. I want to make sure I'm wanted in this space. Can you appeal to that? And if you can appeal to that, you get everybody. You basically, it's one fell swoop. Instead of us having to make a little bit for this and a little bit for that, I make a little bit for everybody by focusing on those who struggle a little more.
So that's beautiful and poignant. And Jason, I could talk to you all day, which means, we got to find a way to connect more, like even just outside of the Mike Muse show. But the way you think about literature and books is amazing. I talk all the time. People always ask me, what am I reading? What's my favorite books? And I say I'm not an avid reader, as most people would think that I am, because I'm constantly having to absorb and read all day, right? I'm always reading articles. I'm just always reading and absorbing on a daily basis. But the work that I'm doing, I'm always learning things. And so sometimes the idea of sitting with a book that's like 300, 400 pages, I just my mind's like, no. But I do love literature though, and I do love language, right? And I'm very loquacious, right? I love Scrabble, right? And I do word of the day on my apps, right? And so I think I still have a relationship with literature, right? Even though it's not me reading a book a month, right? And so I just have a question for you that has nothing to do, audience, has nothing to do with his book that he has, but I'm just curious, just because I am coming off of last week, I was in conversation with Denzel over his role as Macbeth. And we were just talking and had this incredible discourse on language. He was reciting the lines, which was mind-blowing to me. But before that, I had a conversation with some other folk around Shakespeare and attracting a younger, diverse, and Black audience into Shakespeare. And it kind of got into this controversial point of view of, should we create content around Shakespeare with a language that's more approachable, or should it always be in this old English language? And so I just want to get your hot take, on that. And where does someone who is a young adult author who writes brilliantly and is conversationally think about something like that? An audience, he had no idea I was going to ask him that question, but just curious.
I think either one of the choices is a good choice. I think that people who are like, look, we should keep Shakespeare, and maintain sort of the integrity of the quote unquote integrity of the work. I think that's fine, but I think it requires context. I think we should contextualize Shakespeare a little differently. I think we should first reframe what Shakespeare was actually meant for when Shakespeare was writing those plays. Shakespeare was not some upper echelon intellectual writing plays for the rich. Right, Shakespeare was a man of the folks. He was a groundling. He was a person who was like, "Hey, I'm making this for the people, and we're going to critique the royals. We're going to critique the power structure. This is to poke fun, right? Like this is, if Shakespeare were writing those plays today, he, you know, I always tell people, basically Empire was based on what, King Lear?
Yeah.
Right. So like we've seen how that plays out over time. I just think it needs some recontextualization. Now, that being said, I also think that it's totally okay to do some translation work, right? We translate everything else.
Mm-hmm.
How many versions of the Bible are there? In different, there we go, right? Well, I don't know why Shakespeare can't be, and we've seen it with Shakespeare in Love. We've seen it. I mean, it's happened, right? Mm-hmm. And Shakespeare in Love was huge. And it did wonders for people's feelings around Shakespeare, right? I used to teach, right? And I used to tell my kids, we're going to do translation work around the Shakespearean sonnet. I think it was sonnet 138. Sonnet 138, I think it starts with, when my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she may see me as some untutored youth, unlearned of the world's false subtleties. And I would have the kids say, now you translate that into quote unquote standard English. And they would say, okay, when my partner tells me that they're being honest, I don't know if I should believe them for these reasons. Yeah, you know what I mean? And then I say, now you can translate it into, you know, Bed-Stuy, right? And they're like, oh, shorty bugging, like, you know what I mean? She swear, you know, I know it's cap. She swears she's telling me the truth, right? And they go through the whole thing. And what happens is they feel big because their language is validated. They feel like they get a better grasp on quote unquote standard English, and they comprehend Shakespeare simultaneously. And you learn to love a thing that you understand. It's that simple.
Love that. So you were ready for that answer. Not even know you did Shakespearean discourse. Your previous life as a teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing Jason Reynolds. Please make sure you check out his book, Stunt Boy. In the meantime, and Jason, let us know where everyone can grab this book at.
And you can get it from your local bookstore, man. Wherever there's books, you can get this book. I wish the next time I see you, I had a book come out yesterday. New joint. Another one.
What?
Yeah, it came out yesterday, man. This joint, it came out yesterday. Ain't Burned All the Bright.
Oh my God.
It don't matter. Stunt Boy came out 3 weeks ago, so they're all back to back. You know.
Oh my God! I was like going through a complete panic attack. Like, did we just do a whole conversation on the wrong book?
But go get both of them joints. Go get both of them books.
Well, while we have you, a quick 30-second plug. We have to wrap. What is the one that you just showed me? What's that about?
2020. It's about how 2020, every single part of 2020 attacked our respiratory systems. COVID, police brutality, uprisings, the wildfires in California. And this book is about where one might find an oxygen mask. That's it.
For young adults.
For everybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Audience, I feel bad. I feel like we're gonna have that going now and talk about that book. Make sure you go get Stunt Boy in the meantime, and Jason, this book that just came out.
Ain't Burned All the Bright.
Ain't Burned All the Bright. Ladies and gentlemen, what an amazing conversation we just had. Please check out this brother, Jason Reynolds. Until next time, folks. Peace.